Saving is so important, but you've also got to have that confidence to make that money work for you. It's not just about saving. It's that whole picture of how you get your money to bring you joy, to have your values in alignment with what your purpose and passion are.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how and where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute of every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You will hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested. Hi, freedom fighters. What's your relationship with money? Good or bad? Abundance or scarcity? When you hear the word money, what feelings arise and what do you immediately think? Do you feel good or bad? Happy or sad? Sounds a bit poetic there. Is money your friend or your enemy? And what would you do if you could give yourself a big pay rise right now without talking to the boss and without needing to work any harder? Well, in my own experience, money is neither good nor bad. It's merely an enabler, a volume switch that simply amplifies your own beliefs and your own habits. And as my wife Sonia says, you need to treat money like it's another member of your family. So you look after it, nurture it, and grow it so that it matures and then looks after you. Be kind to money, and money will be kind to you. And as Ron Malhotra said so well during his recent episode, money isn't important, but everything that's important requires money. So ignore it at your peril. So how can you maintain or improve a great lifestyle while still saving money and investing in your future? Most people traditionally think that in order to improve your lifestyle, you need to work harder and earn more income. But what if there's an easier way that's right under your nose and it's so obvious that many of us just fail to see it? Because it's not how much we make, but how much we spend that really counts. And as I discuss in my book, The Freedom Formula, freeing up your hard-earned money is actually a lot easier than you might think. And it's all about reducing cost as well as making your money go a lot further. One of the key paradigm shifts here is to grasp and apply the concept of access versus ownership, as espoused by collaborative consumption thought leader Rachel Botsman in her great book, What's Mine is Yours, as well as Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek. Now, my wife Sonia and I have interpreted the ideas in these books as only owning assets, that's things that increase in value and or put money in your pocket, and accessing everything else for lifestyle. Basically, this involves extending the current concept of accessing a vast array of on-demand music, for example via Spotify, for little or no cost, versus the old ownership mindset of tying up a lot of hard-earned capital and owning a massive music collection that you only periodically enjoy anyway, and takes up valuable space. But you just need to apply this access versus ownership approach to almost everything. Now, technology has made access to most things more cost-effective, faster and easier, and also provided much more choice. Now, this might require a massive shift in your thinking because we've all been conditioned to believe that to access things we must own them, particularly the big-ticket items. And your ego and your pride will be your biggest hurdle here. For Sonia and I, this simple shift has been a massive game changer, allowing us to enjoy a champagne lifestyle on a beer budget. Examples of ours and others' cost-cutting choices include a range of the following. Restructuring and refinancing property loans alone has saved us and many of our clients between $400 and $1,200 a month, while paying off the loans years earlier and saving tens of thousands of dollars in loan interest. Now, this alone is equivalent to a $6,000 to $20,000 a year pay rise. And while we're talking about property, a properly structured investment property can also result in tax savings of thousands of dollars per year, which can be used for lifestyle or helping to pay off the home loan. For example, a new build rental home can keep an extra $10,000 in your pocket from year one, thanks to claimable tax and depreciation benefits. But of course, this is subject to your specific financial position. Now, other things like renegotiating insurances, personal loans, car loans, credit cards, and supply contracts for everything from communications and power can all save you thousands of dollars a year. And how about utilising peer-to-peer accommodation sharing services like Airbnb or House Exchange or house sitting or house mining services that can slash travel accommodation costs massively? Now, again, Serina and I use all of these services to stay in premium locations around the world at a fraction of the normal cost. And obtaining rescue pets rather than buying from breeders saves a fortune and preserves the life of an innocent abandoned pet from unnecessary euthanasia. Our family of Samoa dogs are all rescues. And accessing last-minute services for accommodation and cruises and so on can result in massive savings. A few years back, we enjoyed an all-inclusive 12-night five-star cruise in a top-deck suite around New Zealand and Tasmania for just $1,400. And what about using discount coupon services for travel, accommodation, restaurants and leisure activities, which also provides massive savings? And buying regular use commodity items online on an automated rolling order basis that saves you both time and money and limits temptation. Now, some other examples of access versus ownership choices include only owning and borrowing against income-producing investment properties and assets. That is, not owning holiday houses that generally sit vacant for most of the year and generally cost you thousands annually to keep. Renting the home you live in for lifestyle and then investing elsewhere, known as rentvesting. You can generally rent a much better property than you can afford to buy for a fraction of the actual regular cost of an average mortgage, meaning you can live in your preferred lifestyle location while freeing up your capacity to invest in income-producing, cash-flow neutral, high-growth investment properties where all of the major costs become tax-deductible. Now, Sonia and I were rentvestors for years before it was even a thing, and this has actually been instrumental in allowing us to replace our income by investing in growth assets versus the limitations of a massive mortgage around your neck, restricting your lifestyle and your ability to invest. And how about, instead of owning a high-cost and high-maintenance holiday home, accessing any holiday property anywhere when you want it for a fraction of the equivalent annual cost and with none of the headaches? Or renting a car rather than owning an expensive car that you only drive occasionally. For example, you can rent the full range of the cars of your dreams when you go on holiday or on travel tours. Sonia and I have hired Ferrari, Porsche, Jag, convertible Mercedes on some of our long weekends away to fully enjoy the driving experience without the full cost and concern of owning and housing a high-cost vehicle that rapidly depreciates in value. What about using car sharing for your second car that can also save you over $5,000 a year on average? And you can choose different cars depending on what you need them for. You can also consider renting your second car out to help cover repayments and costs. What about accessing expensive and exclusive high-quality clothes that you only really likely to wear once, for example, an evening dress or a dinner suit, for just 20% of the normal purchase costs through renting services? Now, from a personal experience perspective, my wife and I know that the culmination of these initiatives can have a massive impact on reducing your cost and regaining your valuable time, so you can enjoy a better quality of life right now. You just need to get over your preconditioned ownership pride so that you can improve your lifestyle without sacrifice while maintaining your focus on the long-term wealth accumulation prize. As actor Will Smith once famously said, "Why do so many people spend money they don't have, on things they don't need to impress people who don't care. Or, as the infamous swashbuckler Errol Flynn once remarked, our problems lie in reconciling our gross habits with our net income. Or, as I often say as well, you just need to get past your pride and go for the ride. And if you're looking for many more ways to live a joyful, abundant lifestyle, then you can't go past today's guest, Serina Bird. Serina is a former diplomat and the author of The Joyful Frugalista, host of the Joyful Frugalista podcast, and she's a well-renowned money coach. As a self-professed frugalista herself, she's successfully gone from a single mum to a millionaire and achieved a net worth of over $2 million. Serina's passionate about her frugal lifestyle and encouraging others to save more because she sees so many people struggling with their financial situation. As she says, Australia is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, yet everywhere she sees people struggling with money, struggling in their relationships, struggling to buy enough things to keep their kids happy, struggling in jobs they don't like but are too scared to leave, or even struggling in relationships that are seriously bad but they just can't afford to leave. But Serina knows that life's actually abundant. And when you respect and understand money, she also knows that it almost magically transforms itself into something that grows and just keeps growing. Serina's vision is to encourage you to become a frugalista, spending less and saving more with joy on your path to financial empowerment. Now, in our wide-ranging discussion today, Serina shares her tips on what is a frugalista and how will becoming one help you live the good life, how to look flash without the cash, and how to give yourself an immediate pay rise right now without needing to talk to your boss. And if you really want to get the full juice on how to transform your relationship with money in your life using easy, hands-on, practical tools, that you need to do yourself a big favour then and buy a copy of her book, The Joyful Frugalista. Grow your cash, be savvy with your money, and live abundantly. And Serina is one of the 44 leading money and finance leaders and experts that will be joining me on the Money Debates National Summit that goes live on www.money/debates.heysummit.com. That's HEY summit.com. Now, with COVID-19 still very much alive and likely to be with us for some time, and its ripple effect continuing to create ongoing economic challenges, there's never been a better time nor a greater need to manage your money and your investments carefully. But how else can you do it? What do you need to do differently to not only survive but to go on to thrive in our ongoing radically uncertain times? Now, many of you know that I've been talking for quite a few months now about adopting our Keep Calm approach, where calm, C-A-L-M, breaks down into cutting and controlling your costs, activating and accessing savings, leveraging arising opportunities, and managing your mindset. Now, this is easy to say, but how do you actually do it? What other options do you have? Well, here's the good news. Lacey Filipich of the Money School, who recently featured on episode 122 of Get Invested, so go back and have a listen if you've missed it, along with a national team of finance gurus and volunteers, has taken the initiative to help you with all of your money and investment questions and solutions through this upcoming national online summit that she's created called Money Debates. Now, starting on Monday the 24th of August at 11 o'clock, you can access 15 TEDx quality talks from money and finance experts across the full spectrum of managing your money for you and your family. From money saving tips, managing your home loan better, share investing, superannuation, money mindset, you name it, it's all covered. You'll even get to hear Sonia and I reveal for the very first time the unique way that we've combined to achieve our lifestyle goals. It's called the Madison, and you'll have to join us on Money Debates to get the details. You'll also get to hear a week's worth of live money debates on subjects that include: should you pay off your home loan before investing? Should all money be in joint accounts when you're married? Is financial independence and retiring early just a pipe dream? And I'll be joining an expert panel to debate: can you time the market in property and shares? Now, you'll get to hear all sides of the story so you can make an informed decision actually what's right for you. Now, in all, you get access to 44 of the leading personal finance educators, authors, practitioners, and academics speaking over a full 2-week period. And while there's buckets of game-changing value to be gained from the money debates, you get an all-access pass for the huge sum of just $11. And even that's being donated to charity. And you'll have ongoing access to the content that you'll be able to listen to anytime right up until the 20th of September. So again, just go to www.money-debates.heysummit.com and book your place for yourself, your family and your friends, because there's something here for everyone who's interested in protecting and growing your money and securing your family's future. Now, Serina, Lacey and I just can't wait to see you there. And to whet your appetite, sit back and enjoy this great conversation with Serina Bird. Welcome back, Freedom Fighters. Now, we've all heard that old adage that it's not how much you make, but how much you spend that counts. And that it's not about income, it's more and earning more. It's more about saving and investing by spending less. But what does this really mean, and how does it affect us? How can we live more by spending less without sacrificing our lifestyle? To deep dive into this awesome opportunity that is created, we've now got the pleasure of spending some time today with Serina Bird, who's turned this into a science and an art form. So welcome, and let's get invested, Serina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I'm really looking forward to diving into this because you sort of swim against the tide in relation to a lot of Aussies' outlook on life, and we can learn the most from that sort of an approach. But for those who don't know you, Serina, can you give us a rundown on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you. And just to pick up on the swimming against the tide comment, last year when I published my book, The Joyful Frugalista, I had to field a lot, and I mean a lot of comments from media and others about, well, it's not really fun, is it, this frugalista lifestyle? I mean, I think they thought I was absolutely nuts. And I was like, well, what? What's the alternative? Going out and whacking up a whole lot of debt on your credit card to create instant fun? Like, you know, being in touch with your finances and having that sense of empowerment of being in a good financial position, it's just like it helps you sleep at night. It gives you choices. It's just amazing. But it's just who I know I'm preaching to the community, but in terms of who am I and what I do, I've had a very recent career pivot. I've left a successful career virtually as a diplomat working in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, which I left last November, to be full-time writing and podcasting on the Joyful Frugalista. And I've got a second business too called the Joyful Business Club. So with the Joyful Frugalista, I write. I've got my book, The Joyful Frugalista. I'm also now the face of Savvy Shopper, which is in the Daily Telegraph, the Herald Sun, Courier Mail and associated publications throughout Australia. And so that's on Thursdays that comes out. So it's a column I have every week. I'm also a recipe creator for Australia's Best Recipes, and I write for a number of other freelance publications. I also do financial coaching one-on-one, and I also run training courses. So I have 6 weeks to abundance with the Joyful Frugalista, which I run via Zoom over 6 weeks. And the Joyful Business Club is a new venture, which was pretty much started during COVID, actually, and it's to assist people, but predominantly women who are starting out in business, whether it's side hustles or otherwise. And it's about providing training and support. And I've just run my first successful networking event with that. And the longer-term vision for this is actually to provide a mechanism for helping to fund female-led startups, because there's a real issue there in terms of women with some great ideas who are not being able to get the funding to take that forward. So it's an extension of the Joyful Frugalista, because saving is so important, but you've also got to have that confidence to make that money work for you. It's not just about saving. It's that whole picture of how you get your money to bring you joy, to have your values in alignment with what your purpose and passion are.
Love it, and that becomes the magnet, which I'm going to drill into shortly. But what I'd love you to do then, and that sounds like a very busy lifestyle right there, If I look at all the work that you're doing, there's not much sleep time in any of that. So
No.
But hey, I'd love you to talk about the why. You've touched on it there, but what's the real driving why behind what you're doing, Serina?
Well, I guess I'm going to take myself back about 6 years ago, which is when I went to the Magistrates Court here in the Australian Capital Territory and took out a domestic violence order. Now, I was a middle-class woman with 4 degrees in a fairly successful job, although when you're part of the bureaucracy, you often don't feel like you're successful. I was always driven by self-doubt, but from the outside looking at me, I seemed to have it all, but there were some real significant problems that were going on at home, and there had been for some time. And as I went through that, and it was a very dark and difficult time, I had investment properties, which we were overgeared on, but I did have investment properties, and I had a good job. But the thing that got me through was knowing that I was good with money, like knowing I had that confidence, what I term resilience. Now, that doesn't mean that I had necessarily a pot of cash, but I knew I had the confidence that I could make it through that. And as I came through that experience, about a year later particularly, I just realised how important that was as a point of difference, because sometimes, we hold ourselves back. I mean, men as well, but women particularly. It's that fear of money. It's that scarcity mindset that keeps us in situations that aren't working for us, or stops us from following our dreams. So I just thought this was really significant. And at the time, I was still working full time, had 2 young kids. Life was fairly busy. And for a while, actually thinking about money was very stressful for me. Like, I'd gone from having 10 investment properties, having shares, having index funds, being in a really good financial situation, to suddenly being really worried about money. And I couldn't even kind of read the financial things in the paper, which I used to love doing. I don't know if that makes sense, but I sort of felt almost like a fraud. Like I'd been this success and, that I was close to losing it all, and, who was I to know about any of these things? So from a point of resilience, I went, well, right now I can't deal with that. Because that's all a bit too scary. But so right now, what I'm going to do is concentrating on making really kick-ass budget meals. And I started blogging about how to make meals that were $5 or less. So that is at the moment what I'm going to focus on, is that low level. And then, as I got in a better financial situation, I felt more confident to get back into reading those sorts of things, and getting back into actively investing again.
I love that, and I'm going to unpack quite a bit of that, because there's a bunch of gold in what you've talked about through all of that. But I love the way you've gone to your happy place, which is, and my happy place is food too, by the way. I just love food.
Mm-hmm.
It just puts me in a good mood just to even think about it. And a great foundation to start building on. And the whole designing a recipe process is no different to designing a life or designing an investment portfolio either, for that matter. Yeah. But I just wanted to sort of go back, because you sort of skipped over something that's obviously very impactful on you at that time, and that's a domestic violence order. But before I dig even into that, you mentioned that you're good with money. And that's something that very few people have the confidence to say. So I'd love you to sort of unpack with us why you feel like you're good with money, and where did that come from, and how did that emerge that you've embraced money more as a friend rather than a threat? Because it is, again, talk about swimming against the tide. That in itself is a major departure from what I hear a lot of good, hardworking Aussies talk about.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of power too in just being able to say to yourself, I am good with money, because so many people, like you said, do have such a bad relationship with money. And when I do financial coaching, the first thing I say to people is, when you hear the word money, like, what comes up for you? And people will often say things like battle, or not enough, or, arguments or conflict. And I've never had that kind of relationship, when I talk about money. My mum in particular was quite a good role model for money, although in different ways. She was different ways to what you might expect, I guess. She was a very successful fashion designer for many years. She had, I think, about 4 retail stores, nationally, and she used to wholesale nationally and internationally. Back in the 80s was when she was really very popular, and at one stage she was actually had made this, so 80s, this big mohair coat with all these applique designs on, which she actually made for Dolly Parton. So she was really out there, and she loved property investing, and she was very good at property investing, and we would talk a lot about property investing. But she had a particular quirk, and that was when it came to money. And that's because her father, my late grandfather, he refused to send her to college. So she wanted to go to RMIT in Melbourne and study fashion design. And he said, "You're just a Sheila. You're going to get married. It's a waste of time educating you." So he wouldn't. So she left. Well, she's still at home, but she went into the workforce. She left school before she was 15, and she got a job. And she got a job in a factory, and she learnt from the bottom up, and she put herself through night school, and she was pretty tough. And because her dad never gave her much, she didn't believe in giving my sister and I a lot. She really wanted us to work for things. Now, I understood why she did that, because I had a private school education, and I met a lot of people who were really given a lot. But it was actually really quite hard, because we lived in a really, really big, expensive house. I had a private school education. And so people would expect that I had a lot of money, but I actually didn't, because she didn't believe in giving us things. So everything I had to work for. And so that included working to pay for my own textbooks to go to university, working to pay for my own bus and train tickets to go to university. I didn't even get my license till I was 31. I couldn't afford a car for a lot of years. I took myself overseas twice, first to China and then to Taiwan, and I self-funded all those things. So it was kind of good, but, reflecting on it, I did always have that kind of scarcity mindset. And thinking back on a lot of my money habits, I'm only starting to unpack that a little bit, to accept that it's okay to spend sometimes and to see money as a flow. The good thing is that I was always good about, saving and living within my means, because I had to, and thinking about how I could get money to get what I needed, how I could work, because I had to. But I guess the bad side of that is, when you are, totally at ease with money, you're more likely to take risks, in a sense, and that includes on investing, because any kind of investing, it involves risks as well.
Yeah, well, I come from a similar background when my folks said you can have anything you want as long as you pay for it yourself, and it was like, well, okay, and I actually think it's actually established some really good money habits that have, I think, probably contributed a lot to where we are now. And while I used to grumble myself at the time, where all my mates at school were, the mum and dad was buying cars and doing all the fun stuff, and it was like, yeah, you can have a car, son, but as soon as you save up the money to buy one yourself, go for broke. So I can actually see the merits in what mum was doing there, and it's probably been formative in setting very early habits that a lot of kids just don't even, particularly given the 30 years of unadulterated growth that we've all enjoyed, just there hasn't been the need there for kids to develop those money habits. What are your thoughts around that?
You're making me think more deeply about this, I guess, and that's a good thing. Another really important part of my upbringing with mum too is that she always looked really flash without necessarily having a lot of cash. And that was in part because she was a fashion designer. But she really did teach me a lot about, how to look really good without necessarily spending a lot of money, about how to, invest well without necessarily, breaking the bank doing that, and just how to do things in different ways. And money education is really important. I'm a mum now to two young boys who are 8 and 10. Now, I don't give them a lot of stuff either. Obviously they get Christmas presents and they get birthday presents. My youngest cried when he got his Christmas present this year because he thought he was only getting one. He got a bit happier later in the day, and that was actually quite hard for me as a mum. I was thinking, oh my God, I'm too frugal. He's crying. Bad mother syndrome fail. But then a couple of months later, we were cleaning up his bedroom. I found some Christmas presents from a couple of years ago. And I said, we hardly even use these. And he said to me, oh, yeah, well, that's just because it's Christmas Day, Mum. You only play with things on Christmas Day for 10 minutes. You just want something for Christmas Day. And I'm like, sprung. You are so sprung. But I do encourage my kids to save up for things they want. And on that Christmas Day, the other thing that he really liked, my 8-year-old, that he was delighted about, was a laptop. Now, he had wanted a laptop for several months. He'd been going on and on about it. So we said, okay, I'll tell you what, if you pay half, we will match you. So we went online and we found a cheap, small laptop on Kogan, and then I bought it without him knowing during the Black Friday sales in November, and he matched that. So he paid just over $100, I think, and he had his own laptop. And he was pleased as punch for that. And that was, I think, a really important lesson there about saving.
Yeah.
He had a lot of temptations. He loves sweet food. And my rule with his pocket money is their pocket money is they can spend whatever they like, because I'd much rather that they get used to that concept of temptation and how to handle it as a younger age. But he also understood the importance of goals. He wanted a laptop. He got a laptop.
Yeah, love it. Just that great learnings right there. Hey, one thing I'd like to now sort of circle back on again with some of the gold that you rolled through pretty quickly earlier. You talked about, clearly if you'd built up a portfolio of 10 properties and whatnot with your first husband, there was obviously you're on a mission at that point to do that. Talk us through how that started and what you invested in first and how that ended up getting to that portfolio level, and then we'll talk about the domestic violence piece in the relationship and what that meant.
Well, so my ex-husband's from Taiwan, so he's from an ethnic Chinese background, and I met him in Brisbane only a couple of months after he had migrated out here. The rest of his family had migrated a couple of years earlier, and for various reasons he came out later. And he was studying at university. He had a law degree from Taiwan, and he was restudying law out here, not very happily. It was very, very difficult for him. And I think really when and we met at the height of the One Nation party too. There was a lot of racism in Brisbane at that time. So as a white Caucasian young woman dating an Asian guy, we got a lot of adverse attention, which was, looking back on it, not fantastic, but, it's just the way it is. Love comes in all shapes and forms as far as I'm concerned. It's never...
it's not the package that counts, it's what's on the inside of 100. That works for me. I
mean, he'd been my language partner studying Chinese at university, which is how I had met him, and a friendship had grown into more. But he really had, in his family, they really liked property, and they had almost this immigrant dream, which a lot of people coming to Australia do, about really amassing wealth. And property is one of the most tangible ways for a lot of people to do that, especially when they first come to Australia. It's bricks and mortar. It's something they can see. It's something they can renovate. It's something they can negotiate. And that was very important for him and his family. His brother is an architect, so his brother likes property. His mum also liked property. His sister liked property. So this was, part of his culture. And in my culture, my mum liked property too. My dad also had investment properties, still has one in Adelaide that's done quite well. And so he was also, always talking about property. So between the two of us, amassing properties became quite important. We purchased our first property in early 2001. At that stage, I remember being freaked out because I was like, oh, my God, it's almost $250,000. We're going to be so much in debt. I look back and go, why was I worried? And it was quite a stretch. I was the main income earner at that time. In Canberra parlance, I was an APS level 4, which at that stage I was earning, I think, $36,000 and thought I was really wealthy, which compared to some other people, I guess I was, but it was still a bit of a stretch. We immediately decided to have homestay students from the University of Canberra and then later Australian National University to help us fund that house. And we had homestay students for nearly 6 years. And I would cook their meals and prepare their lunches. We both would, but it was mainly me who did it. And other people would be like, oh, thank God it's Friday, we're out on the town. I was like, no, I've got to go home and cook. So we did that for a number of years, and because we had the equity in that property and the market went up, then we started buying more. Around 2005, we both read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, both Robert Kiyosaki and Sharon Lechter, and then we were like almost possessed, like, we're going to do this. Now, unfortunately, we probably didn't have quite the passive income story, but as a public servant, the negative gearing worked sort of okay for us. Now, buying something that's negative is never fantastic, but, as a stable public servant, there aren't that many ways to minimise tax. So there were some advantages of doing that. But, it does limit. But what really helped us fuel that was that we had these homestay students that were helping us. And so having that extra income from that helped us build that up.
Yeah.
And so then we built up within 10 years. Before 10 years, we had 10 properties. And that was our aim too, to have 10 by 10. And it was a real source of pride. We'd be at events within the ethnic Chinese community, and people of Chinese background, by and large, not everyone, but for the most part, compared to my English-speaking friends, they love talking about investing and they love talking about property. And at that stage in my life where I was often in situations where I was in amongst Chinese-speaking communities, most of our homestay students were Chinese speakers, so usually from mainland China, sometimes from Taiwan or Hong Kong, but usually from mainland China.
Mm-hmm.
So at home I was cooking Chinese food, we were speaking Chinese, we were totally immersed in Chinese culture.
Awesome.
Socialising a lot in Chinese communities, we were talking more about property and investing, and then I was going to work and speaking English, so it was a bit of an odd mix. But the problem with that strategy is that we were a little bit overgeared. Now, when we got to 7, I did want to kind of just pause and focus more on paying down the mortgage on the principal place of residence.
Yeah.
We were living overseas on posting in Taiwan at the time, and my aim was to come back from posting with the home mortgage paid. For various reasons that didn't happen. We went on and purchased another 3 properties, and it was at a time in the relationship was crumbling, it was becoming violent, it wasn't tracking so well. Having children, I think, just sort of exacerbated some of the tensions that were already there. And so it meant that when I decided to leave, there was no, for whatever better word, there was no FU fund that was there. We were overgeared, and so that was actually quite a scary decision for me to take, because I knew I had assets, but I also knew I had to make the mortgage repayments, and suddenly going on one salary to do that was quite scary. And having gone through that, I really, I guess, have reassessed why I was doing this and, how I was doing this. Probably about 6 to 12 months before I left, I asked my ex, why are we doing this? On one hand, I was really proud, we had these properties, and I know property is important for long-term growth, but we couldn't afford to do a lot of things like go on holidays. There wasn't that sort of balance.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that makes sense. And so,
yeah.
And he's sort of frustrated with me, because, he had this migrant dream, I think, of, making it big, investing for the long term and giving wealth to the next generation, which was a huge driver, I think, in his cultural background. And that's a big thing for a lot of people. A lot of my Chinese friends is creating that wealth for the next generation. And, well, hell no, I want to live now. I want to invest and I want to have a bit of a life too. So I think that was a bit of a source of conflict. Well, not majorly, but it was a bit of a difference of opinion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Well, without going into the nitty-gritties of the why around the obvious violence that started to, and the abuse that you endured as a result of that, I'm probably interested to get a sense of how you unwound that situation, because if you're 10 properties in together, you've got kids, and you make the decision that it's not serving you staying there, often unwinding the handcuffs that all those financial commitments entail can create its own challenges. Can you sort of walk us through how you manoeuvred through that?
Yeah, that was a very difficult time. To be honest, that was something I didn't know, kind of, firstly, how to get out, just to actually physically leave. And I also didn't know how to unpack all of this. It just seemed that so many things were enmeshed on so many layers. like looking back now, I'm like, oh yeah, of course you can do it. Like people get divorced every day, but it did seem really, really hard at the time. And it did take quite a long time actually to get the property consent orders. And this is quite a dilemma that a lot of people going through divorce have, because often your property is considered joint until that point where you get those orders in.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of things that from my perspective were sort of a bit unfair for a long time. Like I felt I was paying more and contributing more, and he stopped contributing to childcare and so forth, for instance. But, there's no really way to enforce any of these until you've got orders, unless both people are in agreement. So it is quite difficult. Sort of communication sort of totally broke down for a couple of months, and the first thing I did, actually the day I took out the order, was I went to my bank and told them this was going down, and we put in place a situation where you had to have joint signatories on everything. So that at least gave some surety that neither party was going to deposit a large sum of money and run off or rack up credit card debt, because that can happen sometimes.
Yep.
The order I received is what's colloquially known as a kick-out order. So basically he suddenly could not come home, which is very hard. It's very hard for people that this happens to. And to be honest, I didn't quite realise how harsh it was going to be on him either. And I had a lot of self-doubt for a long time about whether I had been overreacted or had taken a move that was too strong. And it was really hard. I knew he had no money on him, so I said, look, and we were still talking regularly. Like I still sent him photos of the kids every day so that he knew that the kids were okay. I know that sounds bizarre, but like I knew he'd be panicking about the kids, so it was just sent him nice photos so that he knew that like we were all okay, the kids were okay. My dad came up from Melbourne to help, so you knew what was happening. I didn't want him to come anywhere close to us. I was very careful about the messaging, but, I just wanted him to know that, I hadn't run off with the kids or done anything crazy, just to, calm everything down. And I also acknowledged he didn't have money. So I said, look, I'm going to withdraw, $500 and I'm going to give it to you in cash. And I think from then I got my dad to give that to him, and some clothes and a few other things. So in the first sort of days and weeks, that's kind of how things went, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And then within a couple of months, we knew we'd have to make some decisions. He wanted to refinance to a much better deal. My lawyer said no, but I was like, well, once again, hell no, this is going to save us a fortune. So I agreed to that, and so we talked through that process and signed things and made that happen. We also, what I did in the first early stages was I developed a document where there were so many things we didn't agree on, but I would write down what we did agree on. So started from the small basics, like, we agreed to refinance. We agreed to sell one property. And we had to sell one property quite quickly because it became apparent that we needed to free up cash. And that was a shame because it was a really low part of the market at that time. And had we waited even like a year or two, it would have been a much better return. Fortunately, the divorce happened, the separation happened at a time when Canberra's property market had dived due to some retrenchments in the public service. And it's certainly gone way back up now. It wasn't a great time to be selling things. But, it is what it is. Like that's the timing.
Yeah.
And that's one of the limitations, of course, on property, especially if you're over-geared like we were. And I've learnt from that. But, yeah, so we sold that. And then, we went through a formal negotiating process with both lawyers to negotiate what we would do about the rest of the properties. He wanted to sell them all. And so initially I sort of went, yeah, fine, look, we'll just sell them all. And we started doing that. And then he decided that he wanted to buy one off me. And then I decided I wanted to buy the last two off him. And that process actually of amending the orders was almost more expensive than agreeing to them in the first place. So I guess with the benefit of hindsight, I wish we'd thought, more carefully about what we would do. But at the time, I sort of made an assumption that I probably couldn't afford to make the mortgage repayments of half of them. And didn't sort of consider other options, if that makes sense.
It totally does. Yeah, and very challenging exercise, and what I guess what I find interesting there, because a lot of people would just throw the baby out with the bathwater, sell everything regardless of what's happening, and then financially they really put themselves back years as a consequence of the perceived need to wash their hands. Whereas what I'm hearing you saying is that you're both at least smart enough to go, well, yes, we probably need to reduce some of the exposure, but we're not going to just dump it. We'll treat it as a business and keep some of that going, and then put ourselves in a position where we can then individually pick up the properties to maintain our position, which is pretty rare again, Serina. Very few have the objectiveness to step away from the emotion that allows them to do that. So that's awesome. But what I'd love to do now is transition then into the learnings you took away from that first relationship into the way that's transitioned into your second marriage with Neil, and how your respective parts of the investment, saving, and money equation come together. Can you talk us about what did we learn and what are you now doing differently that's working better for you?
Yeah, well, Neil, the situation is quite different. So when I met Neil, I said, I'm looking for someone who has the gold standard. And he said, well, I'm platinum. So
I love it. Good on you, Neil.
Cheeky bugger. But no, he also shared very similar money values. Like I wouldn't say I was worried, but by this stage I was already writing quite a lot on my previous blog, Miss Frugal is, about frugal living. And I also had decided from an earlier relationship where I've been dating someone who in my book I referred to as Mr. Red Sports Car, who had been very, very spendy. I didn't want to be with someone who had very different money values to my own as well. So I was always very upfront that, I spent a lot of money, time and effort into consolidating where we were previously. I've now got a new apartment I just moved into, which had a very small mortgage. Previous, I'd had no mortgage at all on the family home, but this one had a small mortgage. Yeah. I live in a very frugal and sustainable way, and so I'm not interested in a long-term relationship with someone who doesn't, meet those values. And like I said, he said, well, I'm platinum, so I'm fine. But actually, yes, he also shares very, very similar money values, and that's been confirmed to me not just from him but from his daughters, who said, oh yeah, Dad's been a tight ass for years, he's always been frugal. But and he is, and we complement each other in different ways, because where he's very good is particularly fixing things and mending things. He's quite handy, so often we save a lot of money as a couple with those particular strengths that he brings to it. And he's quite fine going shopping at Aldi or Costco. He's quite fine picking up free things for me through the Buy Nothing network, or, coming with me to do those things. He doesn't have expensive tastes. We bought a new car last year, a new second-hand car, and he negotiated a really good deal on that. We got it through Pickles Auction in Melbourne and had it freighted up from Canberra. He did a lot of research, and the insured value was $23,000 and he bought it for $17,000. Nice. So, his has those similar kind of values. Initially, in the first months that we were together, I insisted he pay rent. And looking back now, that was kind of a bit rough on him because he was going through separation and didn't have a lot of cash flow. But I really wanted to make sure that I didn't end up in a situation where I was having to support a boyfriend, if that makes sense. Yeah. And then we moved within a couple of months to using a particular app called Splitwise, where we would put in both of our joint expenses so that it would be fair. We were both on virtually the identical income. We were both at the same level in government, so it made it a bit easier, and we would split things 50-50. So we did that for a number of months. And then we started doing that, I think, about October, November 2017. By about July of the next year, it had become really apparent to me that we shared very, very similar money habits. We had very similar spending habits, and it would make much more sense if we combined our finances. So we had that chat. Now, specifically, it was a lot better that we both focused on paying down the mortgage of my apartment. So we had a discussion too about whether or not to have a prenuptial agreement, and actually we both made it onto the set of an SBS Insight program to talk about prenups, or binding financial agreements, or BFAs they're called in Australia. And this was based on a blog post I had done. We actually didn't get to speak at all, and I think that's because neither of us were that controversial. But basically, by this stage, we were having regular chats about money. We knew we shared the same values. We'd worked out that it was much better that we focused on joint goals as a couple. The sticking point, in a way, was how we dealt with kids because, and particularly inheritances, because he has 3 children. He had his first daughter when he was 21. I had my second child just before I turned 40. So there's quite a difference in ages. In fact, he's also a grandfather. So he's only 4 years older than me, but we just had, a very different scale with that.
Yeah.
But then we just had a discussion about how we would actually handle our wills and put those in place, and realised that was actually a separate discussion into how we'd actually manage our finances. And I basically said, okay, look, I agree that, you move in, you don't pay me rent anymore. What is mine is yours. So that includes, investment properties and my property here. And that has, for us as a couple, been really liberating. Last November, when I left my job, I quit my job, he has now become the main provider as I build up my business, and he supports me to do that. So for us, it's been this joint exercise surprisingly has worked really well. And I say surprisingly because it is really different for every couple. And if I was someone advising me, I'd probably say, oh, you've got children from previous marriages and you're older when you got together, you shouldn't combine your finances, you should have them split. But for us, it really, really works on a number of levels.
Well, I think you've touched on the key point, and it's not about the money, it's about the values. And because my awesome wife, Sonia, and I are exactly like you. There's a tendency when you come out of a bad relationship to want to put walls up and protect yourself. But I think my own belief is that separation creates further separation, and it can actually create more issues than it solves if it's not handled the right way. The key decision and the key questions that I think people need to ask themselves is, are our values aligned? Because if our values are aligned, then you're not going to have the conflict. And we're 3 musketeers, Sonia and I. It's all for one and one for all. There's no mine or hers. It's ours. And we've never had an argument around money because we've got a very similar outlook on how that operates. So it's just never been an issue. And there is no one recipe that fits all, but I think the key, as you've mentioned at the outset there, is to get really clear and comfortable that you're on the same page values-wise, not just with money, but with life in general. If the values aren't right, you probably shouldn't be together anyway.
Well, this is a very good point because, as I alluded to, before I met my lovely Neil, I had been dating someone for a year who was very high income. He was earning almost 4 times what I was earning, but spendy, really, really, really spendy, in a very flashy kind of way, although tried to convince me that he was frugal because he knew I wrote about frugality, but, the talk and the actions didn't quite mix.
Yeah.
And my lovely mother said to me, darling, whatever you do, don't marry him because you'll end up footing the bill. Now, at the time, I couldn't quite recognise that because I was like, well, what do you mean? He's earning so much money. He's got equity in his house. He's got this. He's got that. It became really obvious to me that we didn't share the same values. And I couldn't actually see how, if he had a brand new M-Series red BMW and I had a 16-year-old Toyota RAV4, how you would combine those two things. Like it just I couldn't see how that was going to work, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And when it broke up after a year and then later on I found out he'd been cheating on me, which kind of, I know, it blew me away. While there was a lot of heartbreak about that, I really went, well, look, I've dodged a bullet because, the values were just not aligned. And with my lovely Neil, it's never really been an issue. The values are so much in alignment. Sometimes the small details, like at the moment during COVID, I've become addicted to shopping at the reject shop and I've been spending a bit more than I probably should. But, we have a bit of a laugh about that and we sort of go, well, of course, we can afford it, which of course we can. And it's fine. And he loves going on cruises, which obviously we're not doing during COVID. Me, not as much. I still have a bit of scarcity mindset around cruising, even if they're, coronavirus safe. But, that's something that's important to him. So we go, okay, it's important to you. We'll make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the joint commitment to the good of the relationship. It's more about the we than the me, which is again unfortunately a missing ingredient in a lot of relationships these days. No, awesome. Hey, you've started to touch on this already. Paint out for me your ideal world and your ideal lifestyle, and then what you're doing and what you're investing in to help make that happen, because it sounds like you're getting close to it anyway.
Well, yeah, and this is fascinating because a couple of months ago I did an abundance mindset meditation, and I actually really struggled with it. And I was like, why are you struggling? I actually had to have a dialogue with myself, and I realised that there'd been so many amazing things in my life I'd manifested already. I struggled to have children, for instance, and I was told that I could never have children, and or at least not naturally, and I was on fertility treatments before my eldest was born, and now I've got two beautiful children, which I didn't expect, and there's such a blessing. And coming out of domestic violence, I just felt so incredibly unloved. I really did. I struggled with that. I thought I was totally unlovable. I thought I was bossy and horrid and mean and difficult and mentally unstable and all these sort of different things that had been levelled at me over the years, and a bad mother. And to, be in such a loving relationship and go through these dark months of lockdown, being in such a beautiful relationship where, we could have a bit of a laugh and, find ways to do things as a family, like jigsaw puzzles or playing mummy, or he's been watching or was watching Red Dwarf with my kids, with adult references going over their heads and everyone's sort of having a good laugh about it. It's just such a blessing. And I'd manifested wanting to have a secure apartment in an inner city area close to a good school for my kids, and I'd achieved all of that, and I wanted to manifest being financially independent enough to leave my job, which I did. So the next challenge then was to think bigger and to manifest bigger. And so what do I want to achieve? What is our lifestyle? Well, hubby has a goal that in about 3 years, when he retires, he wants to go caravanning around Australia. And I want to go and visit a number of the wine regions throughout Australia and write and blog about that as well. I'm not a huge drinker, by the way, but, small boutique wineries, it's just such a labour of love, and every winemaker has their own story. And I'd really want to help tell some of those stories.
Yeah, right with you there. And combine that with your foodie nature. That's going to be a wild trip. That's going to be a absolutely fantastic trip. Hey, I'm mindful of our time because I know you've got another commitment shortly. So I'm going to jump straight into the heart and soul of what you're all about, and that is the Joyful Frugalista. For the listeners who haven't really got their head around what a frugalista is, talk to us about what that is. But I'm interested in the joyful because you emphasise the joyful piece in the title of your book. And maybe it's because people have a negative connotation of what being frugal is, but I'd love to hear it in your words.
Yeah, no, thank you with that. When you talk about frugality, traditionally this brought up a lot of really negative connotations for people. Interestingly, I've noticed that it has shifted in the last 18 months, and I'm hoping it's because of my book. And that's played a small part of that. But, it's almost the worst insult in a way, or it used to be, that you could say to someone, oh, you're so frugal, or you're so thrifty. People hate feeling like they're the one and going out to a dinner where they're the thrifty one at the table, unless, there are some people who are just so thrifty they don't care, they just want to save $1. But most of us have a deep need to be seen to be generous and abundant and loving and kind, rather than scroogey and mean and stingy and awful and poor. But frugality is quite different. Now, why is it quite different? Because I think it's all about resourcefulness. So it's all about that challenge of, say, for instance, doing the research to find the best deal, and the challenge that comes with that, and that sense of satisfaction when you land that. Or we were talking food before, cooking a really good meal for your family. That is amazing. That, it might say, for instance, use some tomatoes you've bought on special, or some pumpkin you've grown from your backyard, or some, making a quiche from some eggs that a neighbour has gifted you, or that's from your own chooks. It doesn't cost you a lot of money, but it's pretty amazing. And I think also for me, there's the environmental and social and community aspect to this as well. Like, it's not just about, credit card shopping online. It's about how you work within your communities. Say, for instance, I'm really big into the share economy, such as the Buy Nothing Project and others. So at the moment, I've been doing a lot of jigsaws during COVID, so I'll often give my jigsaws away to other people and I'll get others back. And there's a huge social and community aspect with that. I'm meeting other people. I'm, putting things into my community, it's spreading that abundance thinking through my community. And environmentally, it's great too because, why does everyone have to have, like one, jigsaw puzzle, 10 jigsaw puzzles in their cupboard? Why not, spread that around a little bit? And in the process, you save a lot of money that way too.
Absolutely. So there's a whole it's an action word, frugality. It's not a label. It's an action word because everything you're doing around that, and then tying it back, I think more importantly to that ideal lifestyle that yourself and Neil and the boys are looking to achieve. You've got a really good reason for doing it rather than you're just not spending money because you're not supposed to spend money routine. So. Tell me, as we sort of expand on that a little bit, for those that might be listening to this going, well, yeah, I've always thought that I've just got to earn more income to get myself ahead versus perhaps I can actually spend a bit less and create the savings that I can invest in things that are going to secure our future long term. What are some of the tangible things that the listeners can jump onto now that can start to make a big difference?
Well, to that, I'd say absolutely. Earlier this year, and I think it was just pre-COVID, I wrote an article for Australia's Best Recipes that went sort of semi-viral. In fact, it did. It got picked up, I think, by the Daily Mirror, I think, in the UK, one of the big UK outlets anyway. Nice. And in it, I said that you give yourself a pay rise basically by meal planning and reducing your waste. And, in fact, my article that has just come out and I'm not sure when this will be published, your podcast, but a recent article in the Daily Telegraph in Savers picks up on this point, that by meal planning you can save yourself about, say, $60 a week. Now, that's just by reducing waste of things that you might otherwise throw out. If you think about it, you have to work really, really hard to get an extra $60 a week, especially in this current environment. It depends a little bit about what you're doing, but, to get a pay rise in a job right now during a recession is really, really hard.
Yep. I think the thing too that listeners probably need to be aware of, that $60 a week, once you throw tax on top of it, it's more like $100 a week that they've actually put in their back pocket, and times that by 52, they've just given themselves a $5,200 a year pay rise right there. And they have, and I think exactly the same way. And we on a similar vein, Serina, we help people to open their eyes to the fact that their home loan is the biggest dormant money waste that they have, and that just by restructuring and refinancing, you can put anywhere between $100 and $400 a week back in your pocket on exactly the same basis, which is a 20 grand pay rise. So there's some really obvious but invisible things that are sitting there under people's noses that can make a massive difference just by taking the time to go, right, I'm going to have a crack at this. What else falls into that gambit that people can jump on?
You've touched on a really good point, which is people are often really busy, and we think, well, why should I bother when I'm so busy? Well, really, why are you working for? If you're working to earn money, well, there's a lot of other ways you can earn money. And so saving on food is a really big and obvious one, and one that I'm really passionate about. Secondly is just renegotiating everything. I mean, you touched on mortgages. That's a big one. That's not something people do so often because there are certain fees involved in that. Like, even though unless you're on a fixed rate, you may not necessarily be charged for ending it early, but there are still a lot of legal and other fees that are involved in that. But still, do your sums. I do my sums about every 2-3 years on that, and often, your lenders are not keeping up the market for whatever reason. You don't owe them any loyalty. They're not going to remember you. So just do that. All your other sorts of things, like I check my energy bill about every 12 months, just, make a few phone calls. It takes me about an hour or two, see if I can get a better deal. Why not? So that's, I guess, the second one is negotiating and going through all your bills. And you can save yourself a week or two's worth of work you can go on a holiday for a week or two based on the money you'll save doing that. So it's really makes a huge difference. And increasingly, I'm seeing mobile phones. I just don't know why people don't shop around for the best deal when buying their phone or on their plans. I find this really frustrating. Both hubby and I have fantastic new phones. He's got one only a couple of months ago. I got one a year ago. He had his previous one for 4 years, and he said he could hardly hear on it, so it was about time. Not that we need to justify, but we did a lot of research on the market to buy them online. We got them, definitely, less than half the price of a new iPhone. In fact, much less than that. And then we also negotiated the best, deals for the phone plan. For both of us at the moment, we're using Aldi, but, we look at that carefully, once again, every 6 months and compare what's on the market. A lot of online research to get the best deal. And my in-laws did the same thing. They were spending $45 a month on a mobile phone plan that wasn't giving them much data or much coverage, and now they're down to $15 a month. And so that's for each of them, that's $30 a month. So combined, that's $60 a month. So 60 times 12. Your maths it would be better than mine, but what's that? 720? Is that right?
Yeah.
So, and that's an easy saving. $720 a year.
Yep.
Right there.
Right. And again, right, to earn that, you chuck the tax on it, chuck an extra 32% on the top, and that becomes a considerable more amount. So I think there's just a raft of opportunities sitting in front of us, and if we stop using the excuse of we're too time poor, and to use I love your expression, the lazy tax that people are paying because they're just not taking the time to really question the costs that they've currently got, then there's a pay rise sitting right under their nose.
Well, I must be honest and say that isn't actually my phrase that I have coined personally. In fact, Professor Alan Fels has done some research about a couple of years ago. I think he worked out that Australians on average are paying about $140 a year extra just on the lazy tax. And that didn't even take into account things like energy bills or others. So it was a very low level. So certainly Australians are paying extra each year, hundreds of dollars extra each year, because we are too busy to spend the time to look at our finances.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. Now, we're only really scratching the surface, so I'm going to get you back again to dive a lot deeper into subjects that we've both got a big interest and passion about. But I'm going to switch gear straight into what I affectionately like to refer to as the ambush bushfire lightning round, where there's just quick 5 questions that the listeners always love to glean your wisdom on. And jumping straight in there, Serina, what's your favourite quote and why?
At the moment, I'm doing a book reading club through the Joyful Business Club on Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which is first published in 1937. And so I really love his quote, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve." So often, and I do this myself, we hold ourselves back because we don't think we're good enough, we don't think it's possible. But if you can think it, you can do it.
Absolutely.
And that goes.
And if the readers haven't read that book, it's an absolute Bible for anyone who's looking to manifest the lifestyle of their dreams. It's been an old classic, and nothing's changed. The principles are absolutely timeless. And swinging beautifully into that subject, apart from that and Rich Dad Poor Dad, which you mentioned earlier in our conversation, what's the top book that you'd recommend people read and why, over and above the Joyful Frugalista, which we're going to be suggesting that everyone gets their hands on?
Thank you so much. Well, nearly every year I try and reread The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clason, and I know you had Lacey on recently who recommended that as her favourite book as well, and I do too. And why it is, it's just such easy lessons, and it's told in such a beautiful story way that you can really understand that if you make a commitment to saving a portion of what you earn and investing it wisely, over the long run you will end up becoming wildly wealthy. And also too, I'm going to have 2 books here because Money School by Lacey Phillips is something I'm reading at the moment, and Lacey's book is very good too.
Yeah, that is a cracker. Absolutely agree. No, well done. Changing gears a little bit and on to a lot of Australians' favourite subject to complain about, that's tax. What's the top legal thing that you've done to minimise the tax that you pay, Serina?
Yeah, well, I guess there's two. So when I was a public servant in an area where there weren't many tax deductions, being able to negatively gear in an appropriate way worked for me. Now, of course, it's very easy to negatively gear. All you do is buy an overpriced property and not negotiate a good deal on your mortgage provider and not charge enough rent, and you will negatively gear quite quickly. So there is an art to it, because you don't want to be staying negatively gearing forever. You obviously want to buy something that is good value. And then secondly, just keeping records of everything for tax time, like being organised. I have a folder with all my bills, and I keep receipts for things, and sometimes things that I don't think are necessary claimable expenses will turn out to be. And so long as you have all your records and you have all your bills, and you're aware of what the tax advice is, it's you're prepared and you're organised tax time.
Yeah, and I love it. It's such a simple thing that how many people bring shoe boxes versus a paper into an account and go sort that out, when it can be or spend hours trying to pull it together, or a weekend trying to pull their hair out, figuring that out, versus doing exactly what you've said. Hey, switching back into the investment sphere for a minute, can you share with us what's both the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received so far?
Well, I might go to the worst, and it's actually not a case for me personally, but it was my lovely Nana, who turned 99 in June, who's currently in an aged care facility in Victoria, and she's doing well, thankfully. Yeah. But when she moved out of the family home and into a luxury retirement villa, she went and saw a financial planner. Now, he recommended that she put the proceeds of that house sale into a real estate investment trust. So this would have been about 2005, 2006. And of course, then the global financial crisis happened. All of that money was frozen. So she's now 99, and my one of my aunts lives close by and mainly looks after her. And she's calculated that Nan can afford to live till about 101, but after that it's going to get a bit tricky. So, you never want to be in that situation, pretty much. And, and it's I'm still upset that she was given that advice. And obviously I wasn't at that meeting and it wasn't my decision to make, but I'm still pretty, cranky about that. But that's just...
appalling. It's absolutely appalling. Well, on the flip side of that, what's the best piece of investment advice that you've received so far?
A lot to do with property. And I think with property too, like, it's not the blue ribbon suburbs necessarily. It's those... looking for those areas where there's a lot of investment, say by a local council, there's a lot of upward momentum. So particularly looking at those suburbs that are coming out, that had been a slum, for instance, and are going through urban renewal. I watched as my dad bought a property in Richmond and Victoria in the 80s. Now, when he bought it, it was Slumsville. In fact, one of his tenant at the time was a factory worker who was bashed up coming back from the pub. So it was pretty rough. Yeah. Very rough area. But within a decade, Richmond and Victoria had a massive urban renewal, and that property value, the price, it's really difficult just to buy into that area now. It's quite different. And so that's something that has stuck with me, and often the places where I invest in are the ones where other people are too scared to. But I look at it and go, well, what is the local government doing here? What is happening? Are young people moving into the area? Are the young families moving in? What is the feeling? How are restaurants doing in this area? And I look for that upward swing.
Yeah, brilliant. The two drivers when you look at property is put on glasses that look at the area in 10 years' time, not now. That's number one. Number two, make sure you're following the jobs, because employment brings income, and providing the income grows, then people can afford to pay more for property. And thirdly, look for change, whether it be rezoning, whether it be urban renewal, gentrification, or new infrastructure. Get in before that happens, and then just sit back and let the tenant and the taxman do the work. It's not rocket science, but not a lot of people take the time to get their head around that. So love your thoughts on that one. Final one in the series, Serina. What's a personal habit or a ritual that you've developed that you think has contributed most to your investment success so far?
Look, there's so many things, but I guess there's this concept that every little bit helps. Like every dollar counts. Now, there's little quirky things I do at home. Like, for instance, I make my own sourdough bread. I've got another bread mix that I home make so that my boys, for their school lunches, I'll home make bread. And there's, funny little ways I use up waste in the kitchen. And sometimes I say to hubby, look, I wonder whether this really, makes a difference in the scheme of things. I'm probably only saving $2, $3 here, $5 here, $10 here. But then I realise that it is, in fact, all those little bits that make a difference. Like every dollar counts. And then often because I'm spending the time, doing those and saving in the small amounts, that when something shiny, like say, for instance, investment comes my way, before I go, oh yeah, that's going to be the next best thing since sliced bread, I sort of go, well, when I think, how much money I saved making a loaf of bread, like, how is this really? Like, let's look at the real numbers here. Like, how many hours would I have to work for this? Yeah. Can I negotiate a better deal? So starting with the small things actually has an impact on the big things as well. I don't know if I've explained it that well, but it's just this mindset of always looking at things.
Totally, because it means that what you're doing in the minute day-to-day rolls into how you're then looking at the bigger picture, and it creates that mind discipline and that allows you to be successful not only in the small things but in the big things at the same time. I love that.
Yeah.
Final question then. If I gave you a microphone that spoke to every single one of the 7.7 billion people in the world living today, Serina, and I gave you a minute to talk, what would you say?
Look, I would say that, I really, hugs to those who are really doing it tough right now, one day at a time, one thing at a time, to look around you, to feel the love and to feel the abundance that's flowing around you and to know that you deserve it. Yeah.
It's, the gratitude and the abundance is because let's face it, yes, there's certainly a lot of Australians that are doing it tough at the moment, particularly in some sectors. But I'd love to compare where we're at versus previous generations, and while it is tough and uncertainty and change is always creates a level of fear, that the underpinning quality of our lifestyle here in Australia, I think, is absolutely second to none, and we just need to keep reminding ourselves of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, love that. What's next new and exciting for you then, and how can the listeners get involved in bringing it to a close, Serina?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, my mind's always racing with different things, but I'm looking at developing new courses for the Joyful Frugalista, and I'm always really interested from my community to find out what topics they want to find out more about and what is really relevant and useful for them. So it's very much driven by my community. And then on the other, the Joyful Business Club, which is a very new venture, which I'm very excited about. I just found out that I've been invited to pitch to the Canberra Innovation Network. So on the Joyful Business Club, I've just been invited to pitch that idea to the Canberra Innovation Network for one of their accelerator programs, and I'm really hopeful that I will get in and that I can do some big things there to help make finance more available to women starting businesses and wanting to take it up to the next level.
Love it. And for those who want to reach out and get in touch with you to get involved in some of the stuff you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that, Serina?
Multiple channels. My website, joyfulfrugalista.com, through Facebook. There's a Joyful Frugalista Facebook page and a Facebook group, and on Instagram as well.
Fantastic. Look, we really only have just scratched the surface, so I'm looking forward to getting you back and on a more regular basis to dive deep on some of the subjects that are dear to us both. So thank you for taking the time, and looking forward to interacting you with on the Money Debate Summit that's going live in the next couple of weeks.
I'm so looking forward to it as well.
Thanks, Serina. Talk soon. Well, freedom fighters, how good was that? To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. It's hello@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/get invested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you live forever and live as if you'll die.